The Vecran homeworld received Admiral Taehyung's message with confusion, then anger, then finally fear. Their military commanders gathered in the War Spire, a massive structure that had stood for 2,000 years. It had witnessed the planning of 100 conquests. Now it would witness the Empire's desperate attempt at survival. High Commander Telchris addressed the gathered officers. He was ancient by Vecran standards, his scales scarred from countless battles. He had never lost a war. He didn't plan to start now. "The humans have destroyed our expeditionary fleet," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "They possess weapons we didn't know existed. But they are still just humans, soft creatures from a soft world. We are Vecran. We are the apex." His officers roared agreement. They believed him because they wanted to believe. The alternative was too terrible to consider. Telchris deployed every ship the Empire possessed. 800 vessels of war, pulled from every system, every outpost, every defensive position. It left their territory vulnerable, but it didn't matter. They would crush the human fleet, and then they would burn Earth itself. The two fleets met in the Dokran system, an empty stretch of space between empires. Admiral Taehyung positioned his 500 ships in a loose formation that confused Vecran tactical analysts. It looked random, disorganized, weak. It was a trap. When the Vecran fleet advanced, confident in their numerical superiority, Taehyung gave a single order: execute Protocol Gangrim. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed impossible. They accelerated beyond what their engines should allow, turned tighter than physics should permit, and coordinated their attacks with inhuman precision, because much of their coordination wasn't human at all. Earth's military AIs, developed in secret for decades, guided every movement. But the technology wasn't what broke the Vecran fleet. It was the tactics. Humans fought dirty. They used the debris from destroyed ships as weapons, accelerating wreckage into enemy formations. They hacked Vecran communication systems and broadcast false orders. They targeted medical frigates and supply ships, forcing the Vecran to choose between protecting their warriors or their wounded. Lieutenant Yuna watched from her station aboard Captain Jiwon's ship. She was young, barely 25, and this was her first real battle. She had trained for this, but training didn't prepare her for the reality. "Captain," she said quietly, "they're trying to surrender. That cruiser just broadcasted a white flag signal." Jiwon didn't look away from her display. "Acknowledged. Continue targeting their engines." "But they surrendered." "New Busan didn't get a chance to surrender," Jiwon said flatly. "Fire!" Yuna fired. The Vecran cruiser exploded. She felt sick. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Vecran fleet was gone. High Commander Telchris died when his flagship was cut in half by a kinetic missile moving at a fraction of light speed. He never understood how the humans had become so dangerous so quickly. The truth was simple. They had always been this dangerous. They had just been hiding it. Admiral Taehyung surveyed the debris field. 800 Vecran ships destroyed. Human losses: 43 ships, 8,000 casualties. By the old rules of warfare, it was a massacre. By Earth's new rules, it was acceptable. "Continue to the Vecran homeworld," he ordered. The Vecran Empire collapsed into panic. Their military was gone. Their defenses were destroyed. And a human fleet was heading straight for their homeworld with clear intent to finish what they started. The Vecran government sent desperate messages to the Galactic Council. They begged for intervention. They offered reparations. They promised to return all conquered territory and release all subjugated species. They would do anything if the Council would stop the humans. The Council debated for 3 days. Some species argued for military intervention. Others pointed out that intervening against humanity might make them the next target. In the end, the Council issued a strongly worded statement condemning the violence and asking both sides to negotiate. Admiral Taehyung read the statement and deleted it. His fleet arrived in orbit of the Vecran homeworld. It was beautiful from space, covered in red oceans and purple forests. 12 billion Vecran lived on its surface. They looked up at the sky and saw death waiting. Taehyung opened a channel to the planetary government. His face appeared on every screen across the planet. "I am Admiral Taehyung of Earth," he said. "Your empire murdered 3 million of my people. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. You have 72 hours to evacuate this planet. After that time, we will deploy weapons that will make it uninhabitable for 10,000 years." The transmission ended. On Earth, Dr. Sora monitored the deployment of Project Worldbreaker. The weapon was already in position, hidden among the debris in high orbit. It was a small thing, barely larger than a person, but it contained enough power to tear a world apart from the inside. She had designed it during the darkest part of her career. She had hoped it would never be used. Now she was preparing to activate it, and she couldn't decide if she felt proud or horrified. "Doctor," her assistant said quietly, "the Vecren are broadcasting. They're not evacuating. They're calling our bluff." Sora pulled up the Vecren transmission. Their leader stood in some grand chamber, surrounded by advisors. He looked defiant. "Humans are not monsters," the Vecren leader proclaimed. "They are pretending to be strong, but they will not destroy an entire world. It goes against everything their civilization claims to value. We will not be intimidated by empty threats." Sora closed the transmission and opened a secure channel to Admiral Taehyung. "Admiral," she said, "they're not evacuating." Taehyung was quiet for a moment. Then they chose this. "Activate World Breaker. Sir, there are 12 billion civilians who are citizens of an empire that committed genocide," Taehyung said coldly. They had 72 hours to leave. They chose to stay. "Activate the weapon." Sora's hand hovered over the activation command. She thought about all the lives that would end if she pressed it. 12 billion souls. Children, families, people who had never hurt anyone. She thought about New Busan. 3 million souls. Her cousin had lived there. Children, families, people who had never hurt anyone. She activated World Breaker. The weapon didn't look impressive. It simply sent a pulse of energy into the planet's core. Nothing seemed to happen for several minutes. Then the ground started shaking. Lieutenant Yuna watched from her station as the Vecren homeworld began to die. Earthquakes rippled across continents. Volcanoes that had been dormant for millennia erupted simultaneously. The planet's magnetic field collapsed, letting radiation pour through the atmosphere. "Captain," Yuna whispered, "we're really doing this." Jiwon watched the devastation with empty eyes. She had stopped feeling much of anything after New Busan. "Yes," she said simply. The Vecren government sent frantic messages. They agreed to evacuate. They agreed to surrender. They would accept any terms, pay any price, do anything humanity demanded. Admiral Taehyung read their pleas and felt nothing. "They had 72 hours, he said. "Tell them the deadline has passed." The Vecren homeworld died over the course of 6 hours. The initial destruction killed billions. The survivors fled into space in whatever ships they could find, watching their world tear itself apart. By the time it ended, the planet was a molten ruin. 12 billion people were dead or dying. The Vecren Empire, which had stood for 3,000 years, was broken beyond repair. The galaxy watched in absolute horror. Every species with space travel capability received the recordings. They saw a world die. They saw humanity do something no civilized species would ever consider. And they understood that humanity wasn't civilized anymore. The remaining Vecren colonies surrendered immediately. They accepted Earth's terms without argument. Complete disarmament, reparations paid over the next century, permanent human oversight of their military, and public acknowledgement of their genocide of New Busan. Admiral Taehyung read their surrender document without satisfaction. Victory didn't feel like victory. It felt like necessity. Captain Jiwon stood alone in her quarters, staring at a photo of her sister and the children. They were smiling. They had been happy on New Busan. They had believed that civilization would protect them. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the photo. "I'm sorry we couldn't save you. I'm sorry for what we became to avenge you." In the photo, her sister's smile didn't change. The children's eyes stayed bright and innocent. Jiwon put the photo away and returned to her duties. There was still work to do. The galaxy needed to learn that humanity's patience had limits, and those limits had been reached. The Galactic Council chambers felt different now. The same representatives sat in the same seats, but everything had changed. Where once they had debated with confidence, now they glanced nervously at the empty space where humanity's seat had stood. Ambassador Minho returned to those chambers 6 months after the Vecren homeworld died. He didn't come as a supplicant. He came as a conqueror who had decided to be merciful. The head counselor's crystal form pulsed with anxiety. "Ambassador Minho, we are pleased you have reconsidered—" "I haven't reconsidered anything," Minho interrupted. The casual disrespect made several counselors gasp. Nobody interrupted the head counselor. I'm here to present terms, not to negotiate them. He activated a display showing a new treaty. It was simple and brutal in its clarity. The Terran Compact, he began. Article 1. Humanity maintains unrestricted military forces, subject to no external oversight. Article 2. Any unprovoked attack on human interests will be considered an act of total war. Article 3. Humanity will defend species unable to defend themselves for appropriate compensation. Article 4. All previous treaties restricting human military capabilities are void. The chamber erupted in protests. The Helkari counselor stood, his insectoid body trembling with rage. This is unacceptable. You cannot dictate terms to the council. We represent 200 species. Minos smiled coldly. You represent 200 species who watched mine die and did nothing. You represent civilizations that hide behind laws while committing atrocities through inaction. We tried your way for 2 centuries. It got 3 million of our people killed. Now we do things our way. And what is your way? A counselor from the Drexian Union asked. Genocide? Planetary destruction? You destroyed the Vecran homeworld. After giving them 72 hours to evacuate, Minho corrected. After they committed genocide against New Busan. After your council chose politics over justice. Yes, we destroyed their world. We did it so that every species in this galaxy would understand. Humanity is no longer prey. The head counselor pulsed rapidly. If we refuse your compact? Then refuse, Minho said with a shrug. We don't need your approval. The Terran Compact exists whether you sign it or not. But signing it means you acknowledge our right to self-defense and agree not to interfere. Refusing it means you're potentially hostile. And we've already shown what happens to hostile species. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. The council voted in emergency session. It took 3 hours. When they reconvened, the head counselor's voice was quiet. The Galactic Council accepts the Terran Compact. We ask only that humanity exercise restraint in its application. We'll exercise exactly as much restraint as circumstances warrant, Minho replied, which is more restraint than New Busan received. He left the chambers without waiting to be dismissed. Behind him, the council sat in stunned silence. The political order that had governed the galaxy for 10,000 years had just been rewritten by a species that had joined only 200 years ago. On Earth, the news was met with mixed reactions. There were celebrations in some cities, protests in others. Humanity had won, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on many minds. Lieutenant Yuna requested transfer from combat duty to the diplomatic corps. Captain Jiwan approved it without comment. Yuna wasn't the only one asking for transfer. Hundreds of officers who had fought in the Vecran War were discovering that being warriors was easier than living with what they had done. Dr. Yunji found Yuna in one of Earth's remembrance gardens, a place built to honor the dead of New Busan. Every name was carved into black stone, 3 million names that took hours to walk past. You're running away, Yunji said gently. Yuna didn't look up from the names. I killed people who were trying to surrender. I destroyed ships that had powered down their weapons. I followed orders that made us no better than the Vecran. We're nothing like the Vecran, Yunji said firmly. They attacked without warning, without cause, without mercy. We gave them chances to stop. We gave them warning. They chose not to listen. 12 billion people died on their homeworld. 3 million died on New Busan. What's the acceptable ratio? How many of them are worth how many of us? Unji sat down beside her. I don't have answers, Yuna, nobody does. But I know that before we fought back, species saw us as prey. Now they see us as predators. That's not comfortable, but it keeps our remaining colonies safe. Yuna touched one of the names on the wall. Did we lose our souls? No, Yunji said. We remembered we have claws. There's a difference. Across the galaxy, the effects of humanity's war rippled outward. The Kralthek Federation, a loose coalition of species that had been oppressed by various empires, sent a delegation to Earth. They didn't come begging for help. They came offering alliance. Their representative, a being named Gora, met with Admiral Taehyung in Earth's military headquarters. We watched what you did to the Vecran, Gora said. We have been victims of similar empires for centuries. The Council does nothing because taking action might upset the balance of power. You showed that the balance of power means nothing if you're willing to fight for what's right. We didn't fight for what's right, Taehyung corrected. We fought for survival. It's the same thing for us, Gora replied. The Telvanni Empire has occupied 3 of our worlds. They take our people as slaves. We've petitioned the Council for help for 50 years. They tell us to be patient, to negotiate, to compromise. Meanwhile, our people die. Taehyung studied the alien across the table. You want us to fight your war? We want to fight our own war. We want you to teach us how you fought yours. Gora leaned forward. You hid your true strength for 2 centuries. You built weapons in secret. You trained soldiers in the shadows. Teach us to do the same. Help us become what you became. It was the beginning of something new. Over the next months, Earth formed alliances with 17 species. Not as equals within some council of compromise, but as a coalition of the willing. Species that were tired of being victims. Species that wanted to learn how to bite back. General Dong-hyun oversaw the creation of training facilities on 12 worlds. Human military advisors taught their methods to species that had never known real warfare. They shared technology, tactics, and most importantly, they shared the willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. The galaxy was reorganizing itself around Earth. Some species joined the coalition. Others maintained careful neutrality. A few, the old empires that had ruled through fear and force, began to worry about their futures. Dr. Sora found herself in an unexpected role. She was appointed director of the Ethics Committee, a newly created position meant to ensure humanity didn't lose itself entirely. It was ironic, given that she had designed the weapon that destroyed the Vecran homeworld. We need to establish limits, she told the War Council during one meeting. Rules of engagement that mean something. If we become purely reactive, striking back at every threat with maximum force, we become the monsters we claim to be fighting. The Vecran gave us no choice, General Dong-hyun argued. The Vecran are gone, Sora countered. The question is what we do next. Do we destroy every species that looks at us wrong? Do we burn worlds at the first sign of aggression? Or do we find a way to be both strong and just? It was a question humanity would spend the next decade debating. Some wanted Earth to become the new galactic hegemon, ruling through strength. Others wanted to return to something like the old ways, just with better defenses. Most fell somewhere in between. Ambassador Minho, now promoted to Chancellor of Earth's unified government, tried to chart a middle course. Earth would be strong. Earth would be feared, but Earth would also keep its word and defend those who needed defending. We're not building an empire, he told the assembly. We're building a deterrent. Every species needs to know that attacking humans or our allies means total war. But they also need to know that if they leave us alone, we'll leave them alone. It was a simple doctrine, but it worked. Pirates and raiders who had once seen human colonies as easy targets now avoided human space entirely. Empires that had been expanding aggressively suddenly found reasons to consolidate their current territory. The Galactic Council, which had once dictated terms to hundreds of species, became increasingly irrelevant as more species looked to Earth for leadership. Captain Ji-won, promoted to Commodore, commanded a fleet that patrolled the new borders of human influence. It wasn't war, but it wasn't peace either. It was the tense balance of powers backed by the certainty that humanity would fight if pushed. She stood on her bridge one day, looking at the stars, thinking about her sister. About New Busan, about everything that had changed. We won, her first officer said quietly. Did we? Ji-won replied. We survived. We made sure it won't happen again, but winning implies we gained something. All we did was make sure we didn't lose everything. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. Whether that was better than being pitied, only time would tell. 20 years passed. A generation of humans grew up knowing their species was feared across the galaxy. Children learned about New Busan in history classes and about the Vecran War in military academies. Earth had changed, and so had the galaxy around it. New Busan was rebuilt, but not as it had been. The new city was a living memorial. Every building carried the names of the dead. Every park had monuments listing those who had been lost. Children played in streets named after the victims, learning from a young age that their civilization had been bought with blood. Fleet Admiral Ji-won walked through those streets during a rare visit home. She was 50 now, her hair showing gray, her face marked by 2 decades of command. She stopped at a memorial wall and found her sister's name, her niece's name, her nephew's name. She touched each one gently. We never forgot, she whispered. We made sure the galaxy never forgets either. Earth's government had changed. Chancellor Minho still held power, But he was elderly now, grooming successors. The Terran Compact had evolved into something more structured. 37 species were full members, and another 60 had signed mutual defense pacts. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. General Una commanded the Ethical Warfare Division now. She had spent 20 years trying to ensure humanity's strength came with wisdom. It was an impossible job, but she kept trying. Her division reviewed every military action, questioned every aggressive response, and pushed back when the War Council wanted to solve problems with firepower alone. Dr. Yunji ran the Cultural Preservation Institute, making sure humanity remembered both its restraint and its rage. She collected stories from before the HFY War, when humans had still believed in the Council's protection. She also collected stories from after, when humanity had learned to protect itself. It was during one of her lectures that the news arrived. Every screen across Earth flashed emergency warnings simultaneously. The Galactic Council, for the first time in 20 years, was requesting an emergency session and specifically asked for humanity's presence. Chancellor Minho arrived at the council chambers wondering what crisis could make the council swallow their pride and ask for Earth's help. He found out quickly. The head counselor, still a floating crystal but looking dimmer than before, activated a display. It showed images from deep space telescopes. Something massive was approaching the galaxy from dark space between galaxies. The images were unclear, but the readings were terrifying. "We detected this fleet 6 months ago," the counselor explained. "They're traveling at relativistic speeds. We calculate they will reach council space in 18 months. We've tried to communicate. They don't respond. We've sent probes. The probes don't return." Minho studied the images. Whatever was coming, it was huge. Thousands of ships, each one larger than anything the galaxy had built. "What do you want from Earth?" "Protection," the counselor said simply. "The Council's military forces are inadequate. Our members lack the will to fight. You have both the weapons and the willingness to use them. We need you to save us," Minho almost laughed. "You abandoned us to genocide 20 years ago. Now you want our help?" "Yes," the counselor said quietly. "We were wrong. We admit it. We failed you. But if that fleet is hostile, they will destroy everything. All of us. We're asking you to save the galaxy because you're the only ones who can." Minho returned to Earth and called an emergency session of the War Council. The debate raged for 3 days. The arguments were fierce and divided. Admiral Hijin, now commanding Earth's home fleet, argued for letting the galaxy burn. "They left us to die. Why should we save them? Let them face what we faced. Let them beg for help that doesn't come?" General Una argued for intervention. "If we don't help, millions of species will die. We'll have become what we hated about the Council, strong enough to help but unwilling to act." Dr. Sora, older and more tired, spoke carefully. "If we help, we do it on our terms. No Council oversight. No restrictions. We command the defense or we don't participate at all." The debate went on until a young officer asked to speak. Corporal Jehun was 23 years old. He had been born in the ruins of New Busan, delivered in an emergency shelter while the city was being rebuilt. He represented the generation that grew up in humanity's new era. "Admirals, generals, counselors," he began nervously. "I grew up in New Busan. My parents died in the Genocide. I was raised by survivors who taught me that the galaxy abandoned us. They taught me that humanity can only trust itself." He paused, gathering courage. "But they also taught me that we survived because we're human, because we adapt, because we do what's necessary even when it's hard. If we let the galaxy die when we could save it, we become the Council. We become people who choose politics over lives. We become what we hated." The room was silent. "Our strength means nothing if we only use it for revenge," Jehun continued. "The Vecran are gone. The Council is broken. We won. But if we let this new threat destroy the galaxy when we could stop it, then we're not victors. We're just survivors who forgot how to be human." Chancellor Minho looked at the young man and saw the future. "How many agree with Corporal Jehun?" he asked the room. The vote was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would mobilize. They would save the galaxy. But they would do it their way. Admiral Jiwan took command of the defensive fleet. It was the largest force ever assembled by any single species. 8,000 warships, all of them carrying weapons that made the Council nervous. Human military doctrine, honed over 20 years of small conflicts, would be tested against an unknown enemy. The other species contributed what they could. The Kraltek Federation provided logistic support. The Helkari supplied intelligence. Even the remnants of the Vekrin, still rebuilding under human oversight, offered what little they had, but everyone knew humanity would carry the real burden. Only they had the weapons, the training, and the willingness to do what was necessary. The alien fleet arrived at the edge of Council space exactly on schedule. First contact was attempted by a delegation including humans, council members, and representatives from the Terran Compact. The delegation's ship approached under a flag of truce, broadcasting greetings in every known language. The alien fleet responded by destroying the delegation's ship. No warning, no communication, just immediate destruction. Well, Admiral G1 said from her command center, that answers that question. The battle that followed lasted 3 weeks. The aliens fought with technology that seemed barely more advanced than the galaxy's own. But they fought with absolute ruthlessness. They took no prisoners. They didn't accept surrender. They simply attacked everything in their path. Humanity met them with equal ruthlessness. Every tactic they had developed over 20 years of preparation came into play. Kinetic weapons, nanite clouds, AI-coordinated strike patterns, psychological warfare that meant nothing to aliens who didn't communicate. It was brutal and terrible and necessary. General Yuna coordinated the defense from Earth, watching casualty reports climb. Human losses were severe. 10,000 ships became 8,000. 8,000 became 6,000. But the alien fleet was being ground down too. Dr. Sora activated weapons she had hoped would never be used again. World-breaker variants, planet killers, things that made civilized species shudder. But the aliens weren't civilized by any definition the galaxy understood, and stopping them required weapons without morals. The decisive battle happened at the Helios Nexus, a critical hyperspace junction. If the aliens took it, they would have access to the galaxy's core. Admiral G1 positioned her remaining fleet in a defensive formation and waited. When the aliens arrived, G1 didn't try to defeat them. She tried to delay them long enough for Dr. Sora's final weapon to deploy. It was a massive gravity pulse generator, something that could collapse the hyperspace junction and trap the alien fleet in real space where they could be destroyed. The cost would be half the human fleet and the Helios system itself. G1 gave the order without hesitation. The explosion that destroyed the Helios Nexus was visible from 30 light-years away. When the light faded, the alien fleet was gone. So was a third of humanity's navy. 300,000 human lives lost in an instant to save a galaxy that had once abandoned them. The surviving alien ships, cut off from whatever was guiding them, became erratic. They were hunted down over the next months by combined forces from every species. The threat was ended. The galaxy celebrated victory. But on Earth, there was only exhausted relief. In the rebuilt city of New Busan, people gathered at the central memorial. They added new names to the walls. 300,000 more dead. More families broken. More children left orphans. An elderly woman stood before the memorial planting a tree. She had been young when the original genocide happened. She had survived in a shelter, emerging to a world of ash and radiation. She had spent her life rebuilding and remembering. Dr. Sora, visiting the memorial, watched the woman work. "Why do you keep planting trees for the dead?" The woman paused, her hands in the soil. "Because we need to remember what we lost. Not just the people, but the dream of being better. We're stronger now. We're feared. But someday, maybe our grandchildren can be civilized again. Really civilized, not just pretending. Until then?" Sora asked. The Vekrin Empire had existed for 3,000 years. They had conquered 40 systems and subjugated a dozen species. They were strong, organized, and utterly confident in their superiority. When their intelligence reports showed human colonies withdrawing from Galactic Council protection, the Vekrin War Masters saw opportunity. Humans were weak. Everyone knew this. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. They built small ships and signed peace treaties. They were prey pretending to be equals. Fleet Commander Vakresh assembled his armada in the outer system of Tajin Colony. 12 capital ships, 40 cruisers, and 100 support vessels. It was overkill for a human colony, but Vakresh wanted to make a statement. After New Busan, other species needed to understand that the Vekrin took what they wanted. "All ships prepare for system entry," Vakresh commanded. His translator collar rendered his clicks and hisses into words. We take the colony intact. The humans may serve as labor stock. The fleet entered hyperspace. They would arrive at Tajan in 6 hours. Vakresh spent the time reviewing intelligence reports on human defensive capabilities. Minimal, as expected. A few patrol ships, some orbital defense platforms. Nothing that could stop a proper military force. What Vakresh didn't know was that Commander Hyejin had been waiting in the Tajan system for 3 days. Her fleet had arrived silently, jumping in at the system's edge where sensors rarely looked. 20 ships that didn't appear on any official registry. They had been built in hidden shipyards, crewed by soldiers who officially didn't exist, and armed with weapons that broke every treaty humanity had ever signed. Hyejin stood in the command center of her flagship. Around her, displays showed the Vecran fleet emerging from hyperspace. Right on schedule. Human intelligence had always been excellent. They just hadn't advertised it. All ships maintain stealth positions, she ordered. Let them get comfortable. The Vecran fleet advanced toward Tajan colony in a standard formation. Vakresh was pleased to see the human orbital platforms powering up. It meant they would fight. A chase was boring. He wanted the humans to understand they had lost before the end came. His weapons officer reported that human patrol ships were moving to intercept 3 small vessels against his entire fleet. Vakresh almost felt insulted. Then the human ships opened fire, and everything Vakresh knew about warfare became obsolete. The human vessels moved like nothing he had seen before. They didn't follow standard engagement patterns. They didn't maintain formation. They scattered and attacked from 3 directions at once, their weapons cycling so fast that his shields couldn't compensate. But that wasn't what made Vakresh feel cold fear for the first time in his military career. What terrified him was when 20 more human ships appeared from nowhere, materializing inside his formation like ghosts becoming real. Commander Hyejin watched the Vecran fleet scramble to respond. They were good soldiers, she would give them that. They attempted to reform their lines and return fire in a coordinated pattern. It wouldn't save them. Target their life support systems, she ordered. No survivors. This was the part that would shock the galaxy. Civilized species targeted engines and weapons. They disabled ships and took prisoners. They followed the rules of war that the Galactic Council had, established over thousands of years. Humanity wasn't following those rules anymore. Hyejin's fleet fired weapons that had been banned for centuries. Kinetic missiles that punched through shields and armor like paper. Energy beams that boiled the atmosphere inside enemy ships. Nanite clouds that dissolved hull plating and everything inside. The Vecran died screaming. There were no prisoners. No disabled ships limping away. Just debris and silence. Fleet Commander Vakresh lived long enough to send one final message back to the Vecran homeworld. His ship was dying around him, fires spreading through corridors, his crew already dead. He recorded his last words with shaking hands. They're not prey. By all the gods, they're not prey. They're hunters, and we never saw it. Warn everyone. Warn the entire Empire. The humans are... His ship exploded before he could finish. Commander Hyejin reviewed the battle data. Total engagement time, 17 minutes. Vecran casualties, 100%. Human casualties, 0. Her weapons officer reported that they had expended only 40% of their ammunition. Send the battle recordings to Earth Command, she ordered. Then transmit them on open channels. Let the galaxy see. The recordings spread like fire through hyperspace communication networks. Every species with the technology watched human ships tear through a Vecran fleet that should have been unstoppable. They watched weapons that broke every law of civilized warfare. They watched humanity's true face, and they were terrified. On Earth, General Donghyun stood before the War Council. The massive chamber was filled with military commanders, civilian leaders, and AI advisors. They were debating the next steps. Some wanted to stop with the Vecran military. Others wanted occupation. A few wanted total destruction. Donghyun silenced them all with a raised hand. He had fought in the border wars 40 years ago, back when humanity was still pretending to be peaceful. He had watched politicians compromise away human lives for the sake of diplomacy. He was done with half measures. The Galactic Council let 3 million of our people die, he said quietly. They chose politics over justice. The Vecran thought we were weak prey. Both of them need to learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. He activated a display showing the Vecran Empire's territory, 12 star systems, hundreds of billions of citizens, a civilization that had stood for millennia. We don't occupy, Dongyan continued. We don't negotiate. We eliminate their capacity to ever threaten humanity again. Every military installation, every shipyard, every weapons facility. We take their teeth so they can never bite again. What about the civilians? Someone asked. Donghyun's expression didn't change. We give them one chance to surrender. If they refuse, they've made their choice. Across the chamber, Dr. Sora listened to the debate. She directed the weapons division that had created most of humanity's hidden arsenal. For 200 years, she and her predecessors had designed weapons they hoped would never be used. Now those weapons were being deployed, and she had to live with what that meant. General, she spoke up, I've completed work on Project Worldbreaker. If we deploy it, how effective is it? Dongyan interrupted. Sora hesitated. It will destabilize a planet's core. The entire world becomes uninhabitable. Billions would die. Can the Vecren detect it before detonation? No, Dongyan nodded. Add it to the arsenal. Hope we don't need it, but have it ready. The War Council voted. The result was unanimous. Humanity was going to war, and they were going to fight the way their ancestors had fought. No rules, no mercy, only survival. Admiral Tae-hyung took command of the main fleet personally. He was 60 years old and had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. His ships assembled in Earth's outer system, a force that officially wasn't supposed to exist. 500 vessels of war, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a planet. Before they departed, Tae-hyung recorded a message. It would be broadcast on every channel, translated into every known language. The galaxy needed to understand what was coming. My name is Admiral Tae-hyung of Earth, he began. 2 weeks ago, the Vecren Empire murdered 3 million of my people, while the Galactic Council watched and did nothing. They thought we were civilized. They thought we would accept their politics and empty apologies. They were wrong. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Humanity survived ice ages and plagues. We survived wars that nearly destroyed our own world. We reached the stars not because we were peaceful, but because we refused to die. For 200 years, we pretended to be something we're not. We pretended to be civilized. That pretense is over. His image hardened. To the Vecren Empire, you wanted to see what humanity truly is. You're about to learn. To the Galactic Council, you betrayed us. We will remember. To every other species watching this, we are not your prey. We are not your victims. We are humanity, and we are done pretending. The fleet departed for Vecren space. Behind them, Earth's remaining forces stood ready. If anyone else wanted to test humanity's resolve, they would find that Earth had barely shown its hand. The galaxy had feared many things over its long history. Ancient evils, cosmic horrors, extinction events. Now it had a new fear, humans who had stopped pretending to be civilized. The diplomatic vessel moved through space like a white dove crossing a battlefield. Captain Ji-won stood on the bridge, watching the stars slip past. She had made this journey 100 times before, always carrying messages of peace and trade agreements. Earth had taught her well. Smile, negotiate, never show teeth. That was how humanity survived among the older species of the galaxy. Her communications officer looked up from his console. His face had gone pale. Captain New Busan isn't responding to any channels. Ji-won felt something cold settle in her stomach. New Busan was home to 3 million people. Her sister lived there with her 2 children. Try again, she ordered, keeping her voice steady. They tried for 6 hours. Silence answered every call. When they finally entered orbit, Ji-won understood why. The colony was gone. Not damaged. Not conquered. Simply gone. Where cities had stood, only black glass remained. The orbital stations were debris. The farms were ash. The rivers ran dark with poison. Dr. Yoonji worked at her station, running analysis after analysis. Her hands shook as she input commands. Radiation signatures match Vecren weapons, she said quietly. Military grade. They didn't just attack the colony. They sterilized it. Ji-won walked to the viewport and stared down at what remained of New Busan. 3 million people. 3 million lives erased from existence. Her sister. Her niece and nephew. All of them gone. Why? She whispered. Nobody answered because nobody knew. They searched the ruins for survivors. They found none. What they found instead was worse. In the remains of the colonial government building, buried under rubble, Dr. Yoonji discovered a data core. It had survived because it was designed to survive everything. It contained communications between the Galactic Council and the Vecran Empire. Ji-won read the files in her quarters that night. Each page made her colder. The Council had known. They had received warnings that the Vecran planned to expand into human territory. They had debated what to do. In the end, they decided that stopping the Vecran would require military force, and military force might upset the delicate balance of galactic politics. So they had done nothing. They had watched as the Vecran fleet moved toward New Busan. They had listened as humanity's colony screamed for help. And they had kept silent, hoping that the loss of one human colony would satisfy the Vecran's appetite for expansion. It was politics. It was civilization. It was the way things worked in the galaxy. Ji-won sent the data core to Earth, then she sent it to every human colony. Then, because she was done playing by the rules, she sent it to every species in the galaxy. Let them all see what civilization really meant. Ambassador Minho received the data while standing in the council chambers. He was a patient man. He had spent 30 years learning to be patient, learning to smile when he wanted to rage, learning to negotiate when he wanted to fight. Earth had sent him to the council because he was civilized. He wasn't feeling very civilized anymore. The council chamber was a massive dome where representatives from 200 species gathered to debate and decide the fate of the galaxy. It was supposed to represent unity and peace. Right now it felt like a tomb. Minho walked to the center platform and activated the display. The evidence played for all to see. Communications, reports, analysis. The council had known, and they had chosen to let New Busan die. When the display ended, Minho looked at the council representatives. Some looked ashamed. Most looked uncomfortable. A few looked annoyed that he was making a scene. "We demand justice," Minho said. His voice was calm, too calm. "We demand that the Galactic Council take military action against the Vecran Empire for this unprovoked genocide." The head counselor, a being that looked like a floating crystal, chimed softly. Its translator turned the sounds into words. "Ambassador Minho, we understand your anger. This tragedy saddens us all. However, military action would destabilize the entire sector. The Vecran are powerful, and war would cost millions more lives." 3 million lives were already lost, Minho said. "We cannot risk galactic war over one colony," another counselor added. This one was from the Helkari species, tall and insectoid. Humanity signed the pacification treaties. "You agreed to resolve conflicts through diplomacy, not violence." Minho smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Then we invoke Article 7 of those same treaties. Withdrawal in cases of existential threat." The chamber erupted in protest. Species shouted in 100 languages. The translators struggled to keep up. The head counselor's crystal form pulsed with agitation. "You cannot be serious," the Helkari counselor said. "Humanity has been part of the council for 200 years. You would throw that away?" "You threw it away when you let our people die," Minho replied. He gathered his documents and walked toward the exit. At the door, he turned back. "Humanity tried civilization. We tried diplomacy. We tried being like you. It got 3 million of our people killed while you watched and did nothing. We're done pretending." The message reached Earth within hours. It reached the colonies within a day. Across human space, people gathered to watch the broadcast. They saw the evidence. They saw the council's betrayal. They saw Ambassador Minho walk out of the chambers. Admiral Tae-hyung stood in Earth's military headquarters, buried deep beneath the surface. Around him, officers waited for orders. They had been waiting for 200 years. Earth had always known this day might come. That was why they had prepared. "Activate Directive Prometheus," Tae-hyung ordered. Across human space, hidden facilities powered up. Shipyards that had been disguised as mining stations revealed their true purpose. Training facilities that had been labeled as colonial security academies began graduating thousands of officers. Weapon systems that officially didn't exist came online. For 2 centuries, humanity had played the part of peaceful merchants. They had signed treaties limiting their military. They had smiled and traded and pretended to be harmless. But they had never forgotten what they really were. They were the species that had crawled out of caves and conquered their own world. They were survivors. They were predators. And now the mask was coming off. On the bridge of her ship, Captain Ji-won received new orders. Her vessel, which had always been designated for diplomatic missions, received a new name and a new purpose. The registry updated in real time. She wasn't commanding a diplomatic vessel anymore. She was commanding a warship. Dr. Yunji stood beside her, watching the changes ripple through the ship's systems. Weapons came online. Armor plating extended from hidden compartments. The engines that had always seemed adequate suddenly revealed they had been running at 30% capacity. Were we always this? Yunji asked quietly. Jiwan thought about her sister, about her niece and nephew, about 3 million people who had died believing that civilization would protect them. Yes, she said. We just forgot for a while. The galaxy was about to remember what humanity really was, and it was going to learn why humans had survived every extinction event their world had thrown at them. They adapted, they endured, and when necessary they fought.